lived in the land of Babylon. He had been a slave that they took from his land of Israel and took him to the land of Babylon. He obeyed the laws, he was full of wisdom, and he was a good man who loved God with all of his heart. The king noticed Daniel. Daniel was put in as one of the king's counselors along with other men. But Daniel shone far above the other men because he was honest and always did what was right and honored God. The king noticed how good Daniel was and how full of wisdom he was, so he decided to make him the ruler of his kingdom. But the other counselors were jealous. They did not like Daniel, and so they looked for a reason to get the king to hate Daniel. They watched Daniel night and day. They thought, if we could catch him in something he's doing wrong, we can get rid of this guy. But Daniel did what was right, and they watched and watched, but they couldn't find anything that Daniel did that was wrong. But they did notice that Daniel prayed every day to his God 3 times a day. So they thought, we'll trick the king into signing a law so that Daniel cannot pray to his God. We'll see what he does. So they went to the king and they said, King, oh King Darius, we have decided that you should write a law that nobody can pray to their God for at least 30 days and only pray to you. And the king thought, hey, that sounds good. So he signed the law saying that nobody could pray to anyone else but him and only worship him. So when the king signed it, the men went back to watch Daniel. And sure enough, they saw Daniel praying in his window 3 times a day, just as he always did. So they ran back to the king and said, oh, King Darius, did you not sign this law? And the king said, yes. Well, we have seen Daniel, and Daniel is praying to his God. He does not obey your law. Oh, the king felt so terrible because he loved Daniel and knew he was a good man. He thought all day, how can I get Daniel out of this mess? He saw that these men were evil and were scheming to get rid of Daniel, but he couldn't think of anything to do because he had to obey the law once he had signed it. So he asked his servants to go get Daniel and throw him into the lion's den. But before they did, the king whispered to Daniel and said, Daniel, your God can deliver you. So the servants threw Daniel into the lion's den. And all night long the king paced back and forth. He did not sleep, he did not eat. He only thought about Daniel and hoped that Daniel's God could deliver him. First thing in the morning, he ran to the opening of the cave where Daniel was thrown in with the lions. And he yelled down, Daniel, Daniel, has your king delivered you from the lions? And Daniel called up to the king, yes, O king, my God has delivered me. He has shut the lion's mouth, and they have not hurt me. So he got his servants to bring him up from the lion's den, and sure enough, there was not one bite or anything wrong with Daniel. He was fine. So the king ordered his servants to go get the men who had told him to sign this law. And he told his servants to throw those men into that pit where the lions were. And the lions devoured the men and ate them up as they were coming down into the lion's den. And the king of Babylon, King Darius, made a decree that people were to honor the God of Daniel because he was the true and living God and had delivered Daniel from the lion's den. When we obey God and we serve him with all of our hearts, sometimes trouble comes, but God will deliver us and he will be with us and help us just as he did Daniel in the lion's den.